The solitary beauty of silence. When you give up on being understood. Have you ever felt like no one really listens to you? Have you grown tired of explaining pain that you don't even know where it begins? There comes a moment in life when we realize that some wounds are so deep, so intimate, that trying to explain them is like trying to paint the wind. No matter how much we gesture, no matter how much we search for the right words, something always escapes, always gets lost in the translation between the heart and the mouth. Maybe you've already reached that point, that place where words stop making sense and quietness becomes the only honest answer. It's not giving up. It's a different way of existing in the world, a conscious choice to preserve what's too sacred to be exposed to others' judgment. This video is for those who have discovered that there's a strange beauty in not needing to be understood by everyone. For those who have found in silence not emptiness, but a home. For those who have learned that some truths are too big to fit into casual conversations, that some experiences can only be lived, never explained. Carrying the need to be understood is like walking around with a stone in your chest. Every conversation becomes a performance where you need to prove that your pain is real, that your feelings make sense, that you deserve to be heard. It's exhausting to live like this, like being constantly on trial, having to justify every emotion, every reaction, every choice that strays from the expected script. When we depend on others' understanding, we create masks that we don't even realize we're wearing. We speak in a way we think will generate more empathy, tell our story edited, removing the parts that might scare or confuse. We omit the details we consider inappropriate, the nuances that might be misinterpreted. Gradually, we lose touch with our own truth, creating a palatable version of ourselves. Jung called this the persona, the face we show to the world. It's not necessarily false, but it's a simplified version of who we are. The problem arises when this mask becomes our only way of existing, when we can only recognize ourselves through others' eyes. When our self-esteem depends completely on external approval, we lose connection with our inner center. How many times have you edited a response before sending it, thinking about how it would be received? How many times have you held back an opinion because it might create conflict? Smiled when you wanted to cry? Laughed when you wanted to scream? Agreed when you wanted to disagree? This constant self-censorship exhausts us in ways we don't always notice. The need for approval makes us suffocate entire parts of our personality. Those pieces we consider inadequate, strange, or difficult to explain remain hidden in the shadows. The inner child who still cries over old wounds, the righteous anger we feel but cannot express, the dreams that seem foolish to the world's practical eyes. But these rejected parts don't disappear. They remain there, waiting to be acknowledged, growing in darkness like plants seeking light. Jung said that everything we reject in ourselves becomes our shadow. These are the aspects of personality we consider unacceptable, but the shadow isn't necessarily bad. Often, it holds our authentic creativity, our natural spontaneity, our raw strength, our righteous anger. Perhaps the first step to freedom is realizing something revolutionary. Not everything in us needs to be understood by others. Some experiences are too sacred to be exposed. Some pain is too deep to fit into casual conversations. Some dreams are too fragile to survive others' scrutiny. And that's okay. Not everything needs to be shared, explained, justified. There's power in the act of staying quiet. Not the quietness of submission or fear, but the one we choose consciously. When we decide to stop explaining, stop justifying, stop seeking approval, something within us calms down. It's as if an internal war finally comes to an end. The constant pressure to be understood dissolves, and in its place arises a tranquility that doesn't depend on external factors. Why do we insist so much on being understood? Maybe because we confuse understanding with love, because we believe we're only valid when we make sense to others. But what if we were wrong? What if true intimacy wasn't about being understood, but about being accepted even without being completely deciphered? Quietness can be a form of emotional alchemy. In calmness, raw emotions transform. Anger becomes clarity about our boundaries. Sadness becomes wisdom about the impermanence of things. Confusion becomes acceptance of mysteries that don't need to be solved. It's as if external noise prevented this natural transformation from happening. When we stop trying to explain our feelings, they finally have space to simply exist and transform at their own pace. When we stop talking about our pain, it finally has space to heal. We no longer need to keep it alive through words, relive it with every explanation, justify it with every questioning. We can let it simply exist and gradually integrate into our story in a gentler way. Healing happens in quietness, away from curious eyes and well-intentioned but inadequate advice. Silence is also a form of resistance. Resistance against a world that wants to see us always available, always explaining, always proving our worth. Against a culture that turns vulnerability into spectacle, that turns pain into content for social media. When we choose tranquility, we're making a powerful statement. I exist independent of your understanding. My truth doesn't need your validation. My soul is not for sale in the market of approval. There's something deeply restorative in realizing that we can carry our mysteries without rushing to solve them. That we can live with unanswered questions. That our soul can speak to us in a language only we understand. This intimate language is made of sensations, intuitions, and internal whispers. It's often truer than anything we could express in words. When the world doesn't understand us, we're naturally pushed inward. At first, this may seem like punishment. Solitude scares us. We live in a society that fears quietness, that fills every empty space with noise, every free moment with stimuli. But there's a fundamental difference between being alone and being in solitude. Being alone can be empty, desperate. Being in solitude can be revolutionary, transformative. Have you noticed how the modern world fears quietness? How people despair when conversation stops for a few seconds? How we fill our minds with constant noise so we don't have to encounter ourselves? Maybe it's because in tranquility we find things we'd rather not see. Or maybe it's because we discover we're much vaster than we imagined. In true solitude, we begin to hear things that the world's noise usually drowns out. The whispers of intuition that were always there but ignored. The natural rhythm of our breathing, which connects us to something greater than ourselves. The memories that ask to be revisited, not to torture us, but to finally be integrated. The dreams that bring messages our rational mind can't decipher, but our heart understands perfectly. Jung spoke of the unconscious as an ocean of wisdom that's always trying to communicate with us. But to hear it, we need to create space. We need quietness. We need solitude. It's in this tranquility that we realize how many important voices were being suffocated by our desperation to be accepted. How many internal truths were ignored because they didn't fit what we thought others wanted to hear. Solitude teaches us something revolutionary, that we are sufficient company for ourselves. That there's a rich and meaningful internal conversation happening all the time. That we don't need an audience to be whole. This discovery is both frightening and liberating. Frightening because it breaks the illusion that we need others to validate our existence. Liberating because it gives us back power over our own life. In this intimate space, we begin to notice patterns that previously went unnoticed. We better understand our emotional cycles, the situations that trigger us, the fears that limit us, the genuine desires that were buried under layers of others' expectations. We realize something surprising. Often we weren't understood because we didn't understand ourselves. We were so busy trying to be accepted that we forgot to accept ourselves. Solitude becomes a laboratory of self-knowledge, a place where we can finally experiment with being who we really are. We all wear masks. It's a natural part of life in society. There's nothing wrong with adapting our behavior to different contexts. The problem isn't wearing the mask, it's forgetting it exists. When the persona becomes our only identity, we lose touch with fundamental parts of who we are. We begin to believe we're only this edited version of ourselves. When we live only through the social mask, the shadow becomes hungry for recognition. It appears in explosions of inexplicable anger, in strange dreams that make us uncomfortable, in moments where we act in ways we don't recognize. It's the psyche trying to restore balance, forcing us to recognize the parts of us that are being neglected. Quietness creates a safe space to meet these rejected parts. When we no longer need to explain who we are, we can simply be. We can feel anger without justifying where it comes from. We can be sad without having an apparent reason. We can be complex, contradictory, deeply human. In inner calmness, all parts of us can coexist without judgment. There's a turning point in life. It's when we realize that others' approval is a bottomless pit. No matter how much we explain, there will always be someone who won't understand us. There will always be those who misinterpret our intentions, who judge our choices, who question our authenticity. And that's okay. This realization, though initially painful, is the beginning of true freedom. Have you ever stopped to think how many people really need to understand you? How many actually matter? And how many are just passing through your life without any real interest in knowing you deeply? Maybe the list of those who really need to understand us is smaller than we imagine. Maybe much smaller. This realization can be devastating at first. We grew up believing that if we were good enough, clear enough, vulnerable enough, we would be loved and understood by everyone. Discovering that it doesn't work that way can seem like a cruel defeat. But it's actually the beginning of true emotional autonomy. It's when we finally stop outsourcing our self-esteem and begin building it from the inside out. When we stop begging for recognition, a strange peace settles in. We no longer need to measure every word, calculate every gesture, anticipate every reaction. We can simply exist without the constant pressure to be approved. It's like taking off armor we didn't even know we were wearing. Armor that protected us but also limited us, that defended us but also isolated us from our own nature. Imagine the situation. Someone judges you wrongly, misunderstands your intentions, distorts your words in a way that has nothing to do with what you actually said or felt. Before, you would run after them to explain, justify yourself, correct the impression. You would spend precious energy trying to fix a perception that maybe couldn't even be fixed. Now, you take a deep breath and let it pass. Not because you don't care, but because you know your truth doesn't depend on others' opinions. This freedom has a price, and it's important to be honest about it. Some people may drift away when you stop constantly adapting to their expectations. Some relationships may become more superficial when you stop feeding them with your need for approval. But what remains is more authentic, more solid, more nourishing. The people who stay are those who can love you without needing to completely understand every aspect of you. There's a communication that happens beyond words. It's the language of subtle gestures, of looks that meet in moments of mutual understanding, of energies that recognize each other without needing explanations. When we stop talking so much, we begin to notice this more subtle communication that's often truer than any intellectual discussion. What's more real? The words we say or what our body communicates? The rational explanation we give or the energy we emanate? Maybe true communication happens in the spaces between words, in what's not said but deeply felt. Quietness carries meanings that words cannot reach. A silent embrace after a loss, which says more than any verbal consolation. The look that says, "I understand," without needing detailed explanations. The presence that comforts without trying to solve anything, that simply witnesses our pain without the need to fix it. These are moments where soul speaks directly to another soul, in a language that transcends intellect. Jung believed that the unconscious communicates primarily through symbols, not rational concepts. In dreams that visit us with strange but meaningful images. In intuitions that arrive as internal whispers. In synchronicities that seem like coincidences but carry messages. When we create space for tranquility in our lives, we begin to notice these more subtle messages. This constant conversation between our consciousness and the depths of our being. Often, what we really need is not to be understood intellectually, but to be felt emotionally. Someone who sits beside us in pain without trying to fix it. Someone who witnesses our joy without needing to understand where it comes from, or if it's justified. This is a much deeper form of communication than any analysis or explanation. It's soul-to-soul recognition, which doesn't need words to happen. Calmness also teaches us to listen better. When we speak less, our perception naturally sharpens. We begin to notice details that previously went unnoticed. Someone's tone of voice that reveals more than their words. The sadness disguised behind a social smile. The unexpressed needs of people around us. Quietness makes us more sensitive observers of human life in all its complexity. Jung spoke of a process called individuation. The path each person travels to become who they really are. Integrating all parts of personality, including those that were rejected or hidden. It's a solitary process, often misunderstood by others. It's not about becoming special or superior. It's about becoming whole, complete, authentic. Individuation isn't about becoming perfect or socially acceptable. It's about becoming whole. This means accepting our shadow aspects, our inherent complexity, our fundamental contradictions. It means stopping trying to be who we think we should be and starting to be who we are, with all the aspects that includes the beautiful and the challenging, the accepted and the rejected. This process often puts us in conflict with social expectations. When we begin to live our inner truth, some people may feel uncomfortable, may try to pull us back to the previous pattern, which was more predictable and less threatening to them. This is where tranquility becomes especially important. It protects us from external pressure while our new self is still forming. We don't need to convince anyone about our path of self-knowledge. We don't need to justify our choices or explain our transformations to those who aren't ready to understand them. The self, that deeper core of personality that Jung described, doesn't need external approval to exist. It simply is, like a tree that grows following its inner nature. There's a strange beauty in living in coherence with our inner truth, even if it doesn't make sense to others. It's like singing a song that only our soul knows the melody to. It may seem lonely at first, but it's infinitely more authentic than pretending to know the songs everyone else is singing. It's choosing the solitude of authenticity over the company of falseness. Nature teaches us about the power of quietness in ways our noisy civilization has forgotten. A tree doesn't need to explain why it grows in a specific direction. It simply follows the light, the needs of its roots, the wisdom coded in its DNA. A river doesn't justify its course. It flows following natural geography, going around obstacles with silent persistence. The wind doesn't apologize for its strength. It simply is, transforming the landscape with its presence. Have you ever observed how nature operates in perfect harmony without needing words? How birds know when to migrate? How plants turn toward the sun? How cycles complete themselves without haste or explanations? There's an intelligence operating that doesn't need our understanding to function perfectly. We can learn to incorporate this natural tranquility into our daily lives. The sacred moment between inhaling and exhaling, where all life is concentrated. The conscious pause before responding to provocation, creating space for a wiser response. The space between thoughts when we meditate, where our true nature can reveal itself. These small moments of quietness are precious portals to a different way of existing in the world. Notice how sunrise happens in absolute calmness, without fanfare or announcements, but completely transforming the quality of light and life. How plants grow without making noise, but with a force that can crack concrete. How moon cycles complete themselves without haste or explanations, influencing tides and human emotions through invisible forces. When we begin to value these moments of tranquility, our life changes in fundamental quality. We no longer need to fill every empty space with words or activities. We can simply be present with what is, without the compulsive need to modify, explain, or justify our experience. Quietness becomes not just tolerable, but nourishing. Silence becomes a bridge to something greater than our individual personality. Not necessarily religious or spiritual in the traditional sense, but a connection to the mystery of existence, to the part of us that's greater than our daily problems, our social concerns, our need for approval. It's a return to the essential, to what really matters beyond social conventions. It's important to distinguish between two fundamentally different types of quietness. The tranquility that comes from fear, when we stay quiet because we're afraid of rejection, conflict, exposure, and the calmness that comes from strength, when we choose to preserve our energy for what really matters. The difference between them is the difference between prison and freedom. The quietness of fear progressively diminishes us. We become small, trying not to bother, not to be seen, not to cause problems. It's a tranquility that comes from denying ourselves, from fear of occupying our legitimate space in the world. It may even seem peaceful on the outside, but inside there's a constant war happening. The war between who we are and who we think we need to be accepted. The calmness of strength is completely different. It's expansive, not restrictive. It doesn't come from denial, but from deep acceptance. Acceptance that not everything needs to be said, that not every conflict needs to be resolved immediately, that not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. It's a tranquility that comes from internal abundance, not from self-esteem scarcity. When we're in quietness by strength, our presence becomes more intense, more magnetic. We don't need words to make ourselves felt in the environment. Our energy speaks for itself. People notice when someone is comfortable with their own inner calmness. There's something deeply attractive about someone who isn't desperate to fill every empty space with words. This type of tranquility isn't absence of life. It's concentration of life. Like a river that, when it becomes narrower, runs with more force and clarity. When we stop dispersing our energy trying to explain everything to everyone, it concentrates and becomes more powerful. Our presence becomes denser, more meaningful. Quietness isn't a final destination. It's a transformative passage. When we spend enough time in tranquility, when we integrate the lessons of solitude, when we make peace with our incomprehension, something interesting happens. We return to the world, but with a completely different voice. A voice that has passed through the fire of quietness and emerged purer, more authentic. This new voice has no haste or desperation. It's not hungry for attention or validation. It speaks when it has something genuine to say, stays quiet when it doesn't. It doesn't try to convince anyone of anything, doesn't try to please or impress, doesn't try to prove worth. It simply expresses its truth and lets it find those who need to hear it, like seeds in the wind that find fertile soil. Have you noticed how some people have this quality? They don't talk much, but when they do, everyone listens. It's not about charisma or technique. It's about authenticity. It's about someone who has learned the value of tranquility and now uses words with wisdom. There's immense power in not needing to convince anyone of anything. When our self-esteem doesn't depend on others' approval, our words gain completely different weight and authority. We speak from the center, not from the surface, from lived experience, not from learned theory, from conquered authenticity, not from rehearsed performance. People notice this change immediately. There's something in the energy of someone who has already gone through the process of accepting their own incomprehensibility that's different, more solid, more reliable, more real. Paradoxically, when we stop trying to be understood at any cost, we become more comprehensible to those who really matter. This new way of communicating creates more genuine and nourishing relationships. We no longer attract people who need us as a repair project or emotional entertainment. We attract people who value us as we are, with our complexity and our mysteries. The natural filter of quietness automatically separates those interested in our mask from those interested in our essence. Cultivating nourishing tranquility is a skill that can be developed with patience and practice. It's not about simply not talking, but about creating an internal space of calmness that can be accessed even amid the constant noise of the modern world. It's a kind of internal refuge we carry with us. Start with small sacred moments. 5 minutes in the morning before looking at your phone, before exposing yourself to the bombardment of information and expectations of the day. A walk without music or podcasts, where you can hear your own thoughts and the world around you. The moment before sleep without external stimuli, allowing the day to settle naturally. These are precious laboratories where we can experiment with being with ourselves without distractions. Conscious breathing is an always available gateway to inner calmness. It doesn't need to be anything complicated or esoteric. Simply observing air entering and leaving, without trying to control the rhythm, just witnessing this constant miracle that is life sustaining itself. In this simple but profound observation, the agitated mind begins to calm naturally. Silent writing is another transformative practice. Not writing to be read by others, not writing to make logical sense, but writing as a form of internal dialogue, letting thoughts flow on paper without judgment, without editing, without concern for grammar or coherence. It's a way of giving voice to internal quietness, of translating the soul's whispers into words. Creating small rituals can help mark these moments of tranquility as sacred and important. Lighting a candle to symbolize the transition from noise to calmness. Preparing tea with mindful attention as a meditative act. Sitting in a specific place that becomes your personal sanctuary. These rituals signal to our psyche that we're entering a different space. A space where quietness is not just welcome, but revered. What kind of tranquility have you been cultivating in your life? Is it the calmness of fear or the quietness of strength? Is it the one that diminishes or the one that expands? Is it the one that hides or the one that reveals? The answer to these questions can completely change your relationship with moments of quietness. Not being understood doesn't mean being wrong or inadequate. Often it means being ahead of your own time, speaking a language that's still being developed, carrying truths that haven't yet found their words in the collective vocabulary. Your incomprehensibility may be a sign of your originality, not your inadequacy. It may be evidence that you're touching something too real to be easily categorized. The tranquility born from accepting this reality isn't passive resignation. It's active wisdom. It's the deep understanding that our essence is greater than our ability to explain it, that our soul is vaster than our ability to translate it into words that others can completely understand. And this isn't something tragic to be lamented. It's something beautiful to be celebrated. It's proof that we're more mysterious and profound than our rational mind can understand. There's extraordinary beauty in this mystery that doesn't need to be solved, only lived. If you enjoyed this content, check out my ebook, Alchemy and Archetypes, subscribe to the channel, and stay with me for the next video.